My folks disposed of their residence and handed $450,000 to my sibling, then attempted to barge into my place as if it belonged to them, until my subsequent actions stunned them. I'm a 38-year-old guy wedded to my spouse Kayla for 6 years. She's a brilliant architect earning a solid income. I operate a bespoke furniture enterprise that I established from scratch. I possess 2 homes. The one we reside in is decent, not extravagantly pricey, but cozy. The other home I acquired as an investment around 3 years back. It's a modest spot, and I leased it to this youthful pair, Max and Jenny. They always pay promptly, never create issues, ideal renters essentially. Now, this is where my relatives enter the picture. My parents had 2 children, myself and my junior brother, Elias, aged 35. And I vow this fellow has never held a genuine position throughout his grown-up existence. I'm serious. Since finishing university, which my folks funded naturally, he's been leaping among these absurd commercial endeavors that invariably drain my parents' funds. In contrast, did I receive family funds when I aimed to launch my venture? Absolutely not. My father truly advised me it was overly hazardous, and I ought to prioritize securing a reliable role with perks. But when Elias declared himself a businessperson, abruptly it became all about backing his aspirations and trusting in his capabilities. Jump ahead to the present. Elias is betrothed to this lady Daphne who, to put it mildly, possesses lavish preferences and no grasp of money's origins. This woman is perpetually in fresh attire, constantly journeying someplace, always discussing their opulent way of life. With what earnings, you inquire? Excellent query. From what I can discern, Elias is presently in between projects once more, meaning he's surviving on my parents' benevolence as he investigates fresh prospects. Daphne isn't employed either since she's concentrating on nuptial arrangements and developing her image. Her image consists of sharing self-portraits and cosmetics guides to her 847 Instagram audience. This is where matters deteriorated. 3 months prior, my parents phoned me enthusiastically. They'd resolved to sell the family dwelling. This is the residence they'd held for 30 years, purchased when my dad initially secured his position at the utility firm. Pleasant location, fine area, likely valued at about $450,000 in the current market. I assumed they were at last prepared to reduce size, perhaps relocate to one of those senior communities, acquire something simpler to upkeep now that they're in their late 60s. It seemed logical to me. So I'm conversing with my mother, and she's rambling about how they obtained such an excellent deal and how thrilled they are regarding this fresh phase in their existence. I'm pleased for them, you understand. They've labored diligently their entire lives. They merit enjoying their golden years. Then she reveals it to me. We donated the entire sum to Elias as his marriage present. I'm there pondering if I misunderstood her. You provided him what exactly? The whole amount. $450,000. He discovered this stunning top-floor apartment in the city center, and we desired to assist him commence his new existence with Daphne. I'm calculating mentally. If the apartment exceeded $450,000 and they gave him all from the house transaction, where precisely did my parents intend to reside? It emerged that Elias located this $1.2 million apartment in the fashionable downtown section, one of those sleek high-rises with a doorman and all. My parents supplied him their complete life savings for the initial payment, and he planned to borrow the remainder. With what earnings? Still an outstanding query that no one appeared to pose. What about your retirement funds? I inquired of my mother. Oh, we've got it all planned, she responded joyfully. We're relocating to your leased home just like that. Not might you contemplate, or could we discuss, or even do you believe that could be feasible? No, simply a direct declaration that they were assuming control of my investment asset. I questioned if they'd conversed with my renters. Evidently that wasn't required because I could simply instruct Max and Jenny to depart. You know, violate a lawful contract and harm 2 individuals who have never erred, since my parents required a place to dwell after donating their home funds. The presumption was astonishing. They'd executed this enormous monetary choice without consulting anybody, surrendered their stability to finance my brother's extravagant living, and then presumed I'd resolve their lodging issue by demolishing my rental revenue. When I informed them that wasn't occurring, my father's tone became icy swiftly. We nurtured you, Joshua. This is what kin do for one another. Correct, kin. The identical kin that covered Elias University but not mine. The identical kin that financed his unsuccessful enterprises while advising me to be more practical about my ambitions. The identical kin that just transferred him $500,000 while anticipating me to offer complimentary lodging. I informed them I'd contact them later and disconnected. Kayla was positioned in the kitchen entrance. She'd overheard sufficient of the dialogue to comprehend the situation. "Please assure me you're not genuinely contemplating this," she stated, not for an instant, but I recognized this was merely the start. My parents don't accept refusal, particularly when they believe they're deserving of something, and they evidently thought they deserved my least asset. I had no clue how nasty this was going to become. I'm at the studio last Tuesday when my device begins exploding with notifications. Max was contacting. I nearly ignore it because I'm attempting to focus, but something prompted me to respond. "Joshua, we require assistance. There are individuals at our entrance asserting they possess this dwelling." My gut sinks right away. What do you imply, asserting ownership? They have luggage, and they're hammering on the entrance demanding we gather our things and depart. The lady is yelling that this is their dwelling now and we're intruding. I already suspected who it was, but I inquired regardless. Did they provide names? They claim they're your folks. Naturally they did. I advised Max not to unlock the entrance no matter what and that I was en route, abandoned all tasks, didn't even shut off the equipment, just seized my keys and hurried across the city. The journey there was dreamlike. I kept considering perhaps there was a mix-up. Maybe they were merely perplexed about an issue, but inwardly I knew precisely what was transpiring. My parents had concluded that since I wouldn't willingly surrender my least asset, they'd simply seize it. I arrive at the dwelling and indeed, there's my mother and father on the front veranda with 2 large bags and several shopping sacks. My mother is striking the entrance with her hand while my father stands there appearing all commanding, like he's the proprietor arriving to gather payment. "This is absurd," my mother is shouting. "We know you're inside. Unlock this entrance immediately." I can observe Max and Jenny's drapes moving. They're likely terrified, but they're wise enough not to respond. My parents notice me approaching and my mother instantly shifts from furious to eased. "Joshua, thank heavens you're here. These folks won't depart." "Mother, what are you doing? We're settling in. We informed you we needed a place to reside, and I informed you that wasn't happening." My father advances with that severe look he used to direct at me as a child. "Son, we've been residing at the long-term hotel for 2 weeks awaiting you to manage this matter." 2 weeks in lodging rather than, I don't know, searching for a flat or contacting an agent or performing anything accountable grown-ups do when they need accommodation. "You've been at a hotel because you opted to sell your residence and donate the funds," I remarked. "That's not my issue to address. We're your folks and they're my renters with a valid contract." That's when my mother totally erupted, began shouting about how thankless I was, how they forfeited everything for their offspring, how a decent child would care for his folks. The entire community could hear her. My father attempted another tactic. "Listen, we already submitted our departure notice at the hotel. Our exit is today. We have no other place." Observe how that was meant to be my crisis. They'd trapped themselves and expected me to fix it by harming 2 blameless individuals. Max slightly opened the entrance enough to protrude his head. "Is all well? Should we contact authorities?" "All is fine," I assured him. "My folks are departing." "We are not departing," my mother screeched. "This is kin asset." That's when I exhausted my tolerance. "This is my asset. I acquired it with my funds from my enterprise that I constructed with no assistance from either of you." My father began with the remorse inducement. "After all we've done for you? What precisely did you do for me, father? Because I'm struggling to recall all this aid you're mentioning." He became agitated, began stuttering about rearing me and supplying for me. Interrupted him. "You supplied the minimal legal necessity to avoid detention for child abandonment. Meanwhile, you're presently supporting Elias' high-end living while requiring I provide complimentary accommodation." My mother was weeping now, performing that act where she portrays herself as the sufferer. Where are we meant to go? Anywhere except my least asset. The entire affair was mad. They generated this problem on their own, disregarded every sensible resolution, and were now attempting to compel me to repair it by ruining my professional connection with reliable renters. Max interjected again. Should I summon the authorities? My folks both turned sharply to glare at him like he'd proposed summoning reinforcements. "You wouldn't dare drag the authorities into a kin issue," my father stated. "He certainly would," I answered. "And so would I, you're intruding." That's when it became truly unpleasant. My mother began shouting about how I was preferring outsiders over kin, how she was embarrassed to have nurtured such an egotistical child, how my deceased grandma would be spinning in her tomb. My father aimed for the jugular. Your sibling would never handle us this way. You're correct. My sibling would accept your funds and allow you to reside in your vehicle. At least I'm being forthright about refusing. I turned to Max. If they're not gone from this asset in 5 minutes, dial 911. This isn't finished, my father declared as he took one of the bags. They packed their items back into their vehicle, my mother sobbing throughout. The final words I heard before they departed was my father shouting that I'd rue this. After they left, I expressed regret to Max and Jenny for the commotion. It turned out they'd been concealing in their sleeping quarters for 20 minutes prior to my arrival. Truly frightened, these irrational individuals were going to force entry. I provided them my personal mobile number and instructed them to contact me right away if my folks appeared again. Also mentioned I'd comprehend if they wished to terminate their contract prematurely following this intimidation. But I knew my folks weren't finished. Individuals who believe they're deserving of your asset don't simply surrender because you refused once. They intensify. I just didn't comprehend how extreme they were prepared to go. The following day my device began ringing, and I mean incessantly, like every hour precisely. Various numbers, various kin, all with the identical core message. I'm a dreadful child who's forsaking his folks. Initial call was from my Aunt Susan at 7 a.m. I'm scarcely alert. Brew hasn't even completed, and she's attacking me about kin principles and regard for seniors. Evidently, my folks had contacted her weeping about how their unappreciative child rendered them without shelter. Joshua, how could you inflict this on them? They're your folks. I attempted to clarify the circumstances, but she halted me. I don't wish to hear justifications. Devise a method to aid them. Then she disconnected on me. An hour afterward, my cousin Noah contacted. Haven't conversed with this fellow in likely 3 years, but suddenly he's deeply worried about my integrity. Identical narrative, how could I forsake kin? What sort of individual prioritizes cash over parents, etc.? They nurtured you, dude. You are indebted to them. They nurtured my sibling too, and he's the one with their funds, I remarked. That's distinct. How is it distinct? Disconnect, another termination. This routine persisted all day. By midday, I'd received 8 calls and likely 15 messages. The messages were the most severe. Extended remorse inducements about kin devotion, how my folks sacrificed all for their children, how I'm shattering their spirits. My device kept vibrating every few moments with another communication from another relative who'd evidently been enlisted for this effort. Here's what truly irritated me. None of these individuals requested my version of events. None said, hey, what's really occurring here? They all merely accepted my folks' account and concluded I was the antagonist. My cousin Phoebe dispatched me this lengthy social media note about how my folks were existing like displaced persons in lodging, and how could I rest knowing they were existing like displaced persons, because they chose to dispose of their residence and donate the funds. I'm perusing this material thinking, where were all these conventional principles when my folks were financing Elia's way of life for the past 15 years? Where was the kin worry when I was laboring 3 positions to fund university? But here's the element that really angered me. None of these virtuous kin members proposed to assist my folks themselves. They all had strong views on what I should do, but none had extra rooms or additional dwellings. When I highlighted this to my Aunt Susan during her second contact that day, she became flustered. Well, we lack the room you possess. I lack room too. That's why I lease it to others. You have greater wealth. There it was, the actual motive. Because I worked hard and created a thriving enterprise, I was required to resolve everyone else's difficulties. Because I'd been prudent with my finances, I should support everyone else's poor choices. By Wednesday, I'd had sufficient. I settled that evening and composed the most thorough electronic message of my existence. It required about 2 hours to perfect it. I wanted it to be precise, factual, and impossible to misconstrue. Title: Clarifying the facts, the complete account. I began with the sequence. Folks sell residence for $450,000. Folks donate all funds to Elias for apartment initial payment. Folks declare they're relocating to my leased dwelling without inquiring. I refuse and propose to assist them locate suitable accommodation. They decline and insist I remove my lawful renters. Then I included proof, captures of messages, images of the contract, even retrieved asset documents displaying when I acquired the dwelling and the cost. I wanted all to witness exactly what they were requesting of me. The message was likely 2,000 words. I detailed everything step by step, but the finest section was the conclusion. I enumerated every individual who had contacted or messaged me about kin, responsibility, and duty. Then I wrote, since all are so worried about my folks' lodging circumstances, I'm certain one of you will gladly supply them with a residence. After all, kin assists kin, correct? Please inform me of your arrival date for mother and father so I can provide them your location. Sent at 11 p.m. on Wednesday to 30 individuals. My device was quiet Thursday morning. First occasion in 3 days I wasn't awakened by irate kin. Around midday, I began receiving replies. They categorized into 3 groups: individuals who abruptly recalled they didn't truly have room, individuals who became completely mute, individuals who reinforced and became even harsher. Uncle Bob was in the 3rd group, sent me this extended response about how I was ruining the kin, and rejecting the individuals who shaped me, really theatrical material about disgracing my forebears and severing blood ties. I responded with one line, "What's your arrival date?" He never replied. The kin social media group became utterly silent. All those entries about duty and regard just vanished. Amusing how that functions. By Friday, the contacts had ceased. Either folks realized they'd been given a tail or they figured I wasn't yielding. Either way, the intimidation effort concluded as rapidly as it commenced. But I wasn't finished. I had one additional contact to make, reached Elias directly Friday afternoon. He answered on the first tone like he'd been anticipating it. "Josh, what on earth did you dispatch to everyone?" "The facts. You have an issue with that. You're making the entire kin appear negative." We argued for about 10 minutes. He attempted every approach, how mother and father needed aid, how I was being self-centered, how kin should unite, all the same material I'd been hearing all week. Finally, I got to the essence. "You've got their funds, Elias. You resolved their accommodation." I disconnected and waited to observe what would transpire next. Didn't wait long. The initial indication something was amiss came from my cousin Maria. She's essentially the only kin member who remained impartial during the entire chaos, probably because she's dealing with her own issues and lacks time for more. She messaged me one arbitrary Tuesday afternoon. "Hey, did you know Elias is encountering difficulties with his apartment acquisition?" I hadn't learned anything, but it didn't astonish me. Securing funding for a $1.2 million spot when you've never had consistent employment tends to be complex. "What sort of difficulties?" I messaged back. "Lender is requesting job confirmation and earnings documents." Evidently that's tougher to supply than he anticipated. No surprise. Turns out lenders actually desire evidence you can repay huge loans. Groundbreaking idea. Maria didn't possess all the particulars, but over the ensuing weeks, the tale began assembling via the kin network. The lender had preliminarily approved Elias based on my folks' initial payment and some estimates about his advisory firm. But when it came to ultimate approval, they wanted real paperwork, salary slips, tax filings, account summaries, all that tedious documentation that proves you're not just some freeloader aiming to live above your resources. Issue is, Elias lacked any of that because he doesn't actually generate income. His advisory firm was basically him labeling himself a business person and sporadically meeting folks for beverages to discuss possibilities. No customers, no agreements, no profits, just a site he'd hired someone to create and some cards. The lender dismissed him outright. Without the funding, he couldn't acquire the apartment. Without acquiring the apartment, he couldn't recover his deposit. And that deposit, it was a large portion of my folks' residence funds. But wait, it improves. See, Elias and Daphne had been organizing this enormous nuptial. We're discussing over 200 attendees, elegant location, unlimited drinks, the full spectacle. Because when you're surviving off your folks' pension, why not splurge, right? The nuptial site demanded final settlement 2 weeks prior to the event. Elias contacted my folks requesting they cover it since they'd already committed so much to his future. My folks had to clarify that they'd given him everything and were presently in a single-room flat they could scarcely manage. So Elias began contacting kin for advances. I quote that because we all knew he wasn't intending to reimburse anyone. "Hey, I'm just lacking on the site payment. Could you assist? It's temporary until my firm improves." I received a message from him too, "Josh. I know we've had disagreements, but I could really use your aid with the site payment. It's merely $15,000. Merely $15,000. Like that's trivial." I didn't even respond. Evidently no one else did, because the site ultimately canceled their reservation 3 days before the ceremony. just outright informed them the space wasn't available anymore because payment hadn't arrived. They ended up conducting the ceremony in Daphne's garden. Half the attendees didn't appear due to the abrupt location shift. The other half spent the entire time murmuring about what a catastrophe it was. According to Maria, Daphne wept through most of the gathering about how this wasn't her envisioned perfect day. Meanwhile, the same week as their garden nuptial fiasco, I finalized on my third asset. I'd been examining this spot for months, a small business structure that required repairs but had excellent promise. The prior owner was eager to sell, and I secured it for about $40,000 below value. My intention is to refurbish it and either resell or lease it for business use. I shared a simple image on social media of the keys and documents, another endeavor underway. Sometimes waiting yields results. Nothing exaggerated, just a standard business notice. A few kin members approved the post. I observed my folks didn't, but the tale wasn't concluded yet. My folks were about to attempt one final desperate maneuver. Last Saturday morning, I'm enjoying coffee with Kayla in our cooking area, discussing infant names and examining color samples for the baby room walls. Pleasant, tranquil morning. Precisely the type of serene family moments I'd been anticipating. Then our entry alert activates. I check my device and see my folks standing on our front veranda, both attired nicely. My mother clutching a bunch of blooms and what appears like a food sack. My father's displaying this odd artificial grin, like he's attempting to pitch something. They're addressing the camera directly like it's a visual call. "Joshua, we know you're inside," my mother says in this excessively pleasant tone. "We can view your vehicle in the drive." I glance at Kayla. She's already indicating no. "We brought supplies to prepare for you," my father adds, raising the sack. "Your mother wants to create that stew you used to adore." The coercion was remarkable. They'd arrived unannounced at my residence with items meant to induce guilt, blooms, and meals. Like this was a regular kin visit rather than another effort to override my limits. "We've been reflecting on all that occurred," my mother proceeds to the camera. "We committed errors. We should have sought your approval about the leased dwelling. Insufficient and delayed, about 8 months delayed." I'm observing this entire show on my device while positioned 20 feet from them. The boldness was astounding. After months of intimidation, coercion, and attempts to ruin my professional ties, they thought they could just appear with blooms and restart all. Kayla's gazing at me like, "Please confirm you're not succumbing to this." I'm not responding to the entrance, I assured her. But my folks weren't surrendering easily. They remained there for about 10 minutes, alternating speaking to the camera, clarifying how remorseful they were and how much they longed for me. My mother even began weeping at one point, executing that whole suffer performance she's mastered over time. When it became clear I wasn't approaching the entrance, my father's tone altered. "Joshua, this is silly. We're your folks. Unlock the entrance so we can converse like mature individuals." That's when I decided. I contacted the authorities' routine line, "I need to report intrusion. I've got people on my asset who won't depart, and I have a prior event record involving the same individuals." The operator was highly efficient, inquired if I felt endangered if they were attempting to force entry, typical inquiries. I clarified that they were my folks, but that I'd explicitly requested them not to visit my residence, and they'd already intimidated my renters at another asset. "We'll dispatch an official." The arrival was fairly swift. About 15 minutes later, a patrol vehicle arrives. I observe through the pane as this youthful officer exits and approaches my folks. I couldn't hear the discussion, but I could see my father becoming lively, gesturing at the residence, likely clarifying how this was merely a kin confusion. My mother was still grasping those cursed blooms like they were proof of her pure motives. The officer listened calmly, then approached the alert and activated it. "Sir, this is Officer Martinez with the law enforcement. Could you approach the entrance, please?" I went outdoors and clarified the circumstances, prior intimidation of my renters, repeated requests for my asset, months of kin pressure and coercion. I displayed him the event record number from the leased dwelling incident. Officer Martinez was entirely fair about it. "Do you want them to vacate your asset?" "Yes." "Have you requested them to vacate and not return several times?" He returned to my folks and had another discussion. This time I could hear my father raising his voice. "This is our child's residence. We have a right to visit our own offspring. Sir, your child has requested you to vacate his asset. You need to honor that. This is absurd. We're kin. I comprehend this is a kin matter, but asset rights still hold. You need to depart now." My mother began weeping again, but the officer wasn't tolerating it. He was courteous but resolute. They needed to gather their blooms and supplies and leave my asset. And then they departed. Officer Martinez returned to converse with me. He recommended I record everything and consider applying for a protection order if they persist in appearing uninvited. Sometimes individuals need formal documents to grasp that refusal means refusal. Monday morning, I contacted my attorney, detailed the entire sequence. "You've got basis for a protection order," he stated, "particularly with the prior event involving your renters." We submitted the forms that afternoon. I included everything I'd been recording over the past 8 months. The session was set for the next week. I somewhat expected my folks to contest it, but they didn't even appear. The judge approved the protection order without fuss. 200 yards. They can't approach within 200 yards of my residence, my enterprise, or my leased asset. Breach means immediate detention. I also altered my contact number that week, only shared the new one with trusted individuals. The tranquility has been amazing. No more coercive contacts, no more remorse inducements, no more unexpected visits. Just me, my expectant spouse, and our ordinary existence. 3 weeks. That's how long the serenity endured before the next crisis erupted. I'm at the studio when my device rings. Unfamiliar number but local, so I answer thinking it might be a prospective customer. "Hi, is this Joshua? I'm contacting about the funding prospect your sibling presented last month." I halted, working instantly. "Pardon, what funding prospect?" "The leased asset collection. Elias said you two were associates in a property firm and you were seeking private funders." My pulse quickens. "Could you wait a moment?" I exit the studio and find a calm spot. "Sir, I need you to detail exactly what my sibling told you." It turned out this man, David, had encountered Elias at some connection gathering in the city. Elias presented himself as joint proprietor of a thriving asset management firm and began displaying David images on his device of their holdings. The images were of my homes, my leased asset, my private home, even the business structure I recently acquired. Elias had been roaming the city claiming he owned half my enterprise. He said you two had 3 assets presently producing revenue and were aiming to grow. Inquired if I'd be interested in committing $25,000 for a share in the next purchase. $25,000. This wasn't a minor scheme. This was grave deception. "Did you provide him any funds?" I inquired. I gave him $5,000 as a trust deposit while I considered the complete commitment. He said it would secure my position in the arrangement. I felt ill. "David, I must inform you something. I don't have an enterprise associate. I own those assets alone, and my sibling has never committed a penny to anything I do." Extended pause on the line. "Are you implying he deceived me?" "That's precisely what I'm implying, and you're likely not the sole victim." I obtained David's details and assured him I'd contact back. Then I performed something I probably should have done months earlier. I searched my sibling's name with my enterprise name. The findings made me furious. There were professional connection profiles where Elias listed himself as joint creator of my firm. A career site claiming he was associate and funding manager for my property enterprise. Even a social media business page he'd established using my firm name, with himself as the main contact. This scoundrel had been posing as me for months. I began making contacts, first to my attorney, then to David for more specifics about what Elias had conveyed and what papers he might have. David sent me captures of text exchanges. He'd even sent David a phony agreement with heading that resembled my real enterprise documents suspiciously. But the worst, he'd been utilizing my standing to validate his deceptions, telling folks they could confirm the firm's success by visiting the assets or checking ownership records, because the assets were genuine. They were just mine, not his. My attorney's suggestion was straightforward: record everything and contact the authorities. This is identity fraud and deception, not kin conflict. That evening I sat with Kayla and displayed her all I'd discovered. "This exceeds kin now," I told her. "He's actually stealing my persona to trick people out of funds." Friday morning I contacted the authorities and submitted a deception report. Brought all the proof, David's captures, the phony profiles, everything. The investigator assigned was quite engaged once he viewed the extent of Elias' actions. "We encounter many kin monetary disputes," Detective Rodriguez told me, "but this surpasses that. Your siblings been operating an active deception using your persona and holdings. They initiated an inquiry right away. But I wasn't finished. I had a superior plan. I contacted David again and suggested something. What if we organize a gathering with Elias? Let him believe you're prepared to commit fully and I'll appear unexpectedly. We set it for a beverage spot in the city. David messaged Elias saying he was ready to proceed with the $25,000 commitment and wanted to complete the forms. Elias consented promptly, likely because he was eager for funds. I arrived early and sat at a side table where I could observe but not be instantly seen by Elias upon entry. Elias came on schedule, holding a file that probably held more false papers. David acted flawlessly. So explain more about how the association functions with your sibling. Oh, Joshua manages the daily asset oversight, but I'm the one handling funder relations and new purchases, Elias said fluidly. We've got an excellent setup, and he's fine with external funders, joking. It was his concept. He's always stating we need additional resources to grow quicker. I nearly chuckled aloud. This fellow was committing to the falsehoods even as he was about to be exposed. Actually, David remarked, I'd love to meet Joshua and hear his view directly. Elias became slightly anxious. He's quite occupied with the assets, but perhaps we can set something later. How about presently? That's when I rose and approached their table. The expression on Elias' face was invaluable, total alarm, like he'd witnessed a spirit. His jaw dropped. Hey, associate, I said, seating beside David. David here was just informing me about this funding chance you've been discussing. Elias began faltering. Josh, I can clarify. Please proceed. I'm truly eager to learn about our enterprise association that I somehow overlooked. David was capturing the entire thing on his device. We'd agreed earlier that he'd document all for the authorities' record. I thought perhaps we could. Elias couldn't form full statements. You thought you could pilfer my persona and defraud folks using my assets as security? I said composedly. Is that what you thought? The beverage spot was fairly quiet, but our discussion was beginning to attract notice from others. Elias glanced around uneasily, probably realizing how terrible he appeared. David, I continued. Just to clarify, I have never had an enterprise associate. I built my firm entirely alone with no aid from my kin. My sibling here has never committed to property and doesn't own any part of my enterprise. David agreed. So when he took my $5,000, he performed deception. Elias finally spoke. Look, I was going to reimburse him. I just needed time to sort matters. Here's what's going to occur, I told him. You're going to return David's funds immediately. You're going to remove all those phony profiles. And you're going to hope the authorities are lenient when I press charges Monday. You wouldn't summon the cops on your own sibling. Incorrect words. Observe me, I replied, retrieving my device. Actually, let's summon them now. Elias freaked, began pleading not to involve authorities, vowing he'd correct everything, claiming it was a confusion, the same pretext he'd used forever. But I was done supporting him. I dialed emergency right there in the beverage spot. I need to report a deception ongoing. The perpetrator is here now. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol officials arrived. I clarified the matter and showed them the proof. They detained Elias immediately for deception and identity fraud. The last words he uttered as they placed him in the vehicle was, "Mother and father are going to learn about this." Good, I told him. Maybe they'll finally comprehend what kind of individual they've been supporting all these years. David recovered his $5,000 eventually. Turned out Elias still had most in his account. But the legal accusations remained.